Hi, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 799th New Social Environment. I'm Chloe, Director of Programs here at the Rail, and I have the distinct pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Enrique Juncosa and Marianne Caws. We're thrilled to welcome poet John Coletti here to close today's program. Before we get started, the Brooklyn Rail acknowledges Black Lives Matter. Here in New York, we're on Lenape-Hoking, the unceded land and waters of the Wappinger, Canarsie, Munsee, and Lenni Lenape people of the Delaware Nation and Shinnecock Indian Nation. We recognize land acknowledgements are not a replacement for necessary decolonial work, but serve as a reminder of place of the legacies of dispossession and enslavement that sustain and enrich the stolen land that we're speaking from. And now it's my pleasure to introduce today's guest and host. Enrique Juncosa is a writer, exhibition curator, and cultural manager. He was director of the Irish Museum of Modern Art in Dublin from 2003 to 2012, for which he was awarded the Spanish Order of Civil Merit. He has curated exhibitions for many international institutions and was curator of the Spanish Pavilion at the 2011 Venice Biennial. He has published 9 books of poetry, a book of short stories, multiple books of essays, and a novel. And our host today, distinguished Professor Emerita of several literature PhD programs at CUNY, Marianne Caws, holds a Doctor of Humane Letters, is an officer in the Palme Académique, a Chevalier des Ordres des Arts et Lettres, and a member of the American Academy of Art and Sciences. We are lucky to have Marianne Caws as a consulting editor for the Brooklyn Rail. And with that, I will pass it over to Marianne, to Enrique, actually.
Yeah. Thank you, Chloe, and welcome everyone. I thought we will start talking a little bit about the organization of the exhibition. It actually was Karen, you may know, she was the curator of modern art in the Guggenheim in New York. She is now in the scientific committee of the museum in Lugano, and she asked me to do an exhibition of Miró there. And then Bilbao got involved, and then Lugano fell out because of the coronavirus. They had budget problems. But I decided to focus on the first part of Miró's career. His career, as you know, is very long. He died when he was quite old. And his first exhibition was in 1918. He had been painting for 2 or 3 years before, and he was anxious to go to Paris since the very beginning. And in 1920 was in Paris for the first time, and then was going back and forward from Barcelona and Paris till the war that he went back to Spain, the Second World War. So the paintings go from 1920 to 1945, but there are a few early works as well and some early works afterwards. No? It's not a clinic cut. But the exhibition was organized in 3 rooms. The first room, it had this introduction with some early paintings. It had a painting from 1917 called Nord-Sud that I think was an interesting painting, because Nord-Sud was a magazine that was directed by Pierre Reverdy, and it's a poet associated with the Cubists. And I think it reflects Miró. It's already 1917, reading magazines that at that time were a very important way of communicating new ideas. No? So there is this work referring to Paris. Then there is a landscape called Prades, the village from the collection of the Guggenheim in New York. Then the self-portraits from 1919, the portrait of a Spanish dancer. They were both from the collection of Picasso, and they still are in the Picasso Museum in Paris. And then there is also a project for the cover of a magazine from Barcelona called L'Instant, that it was an avant-garde magazine that did this issue of Barcelona and Paris in 1718. And it was the magazine published some poems of Apollinaire. It was a very major avant-garde magazine. Anyway, so I show those works as an introduction, even if they are from before 1920, because I thought they show that Miró is still doing landscapes and cover for magazines and portraits and self-portraits and still lifes, and it's coming from traditional genres of painting. But in 92 and 93, 24, he did a very big change. No? And there is another painting here that we will talk about. We will show it later when I finish talking about general the exhibition, called The Interior, the Farmer's Wife. And it's still a painting you can recognize the elements in the painting. There is this woman carrying a basket and holding a hair, and there is also a cat and a fireplace. But anyway, then the second room, because I will come back to the paintings, it had mainly paintings from the 1920s, the trim paintings, and up to 1927 or even the 30s. No? And the last room, that's very big room, it had paintings from the 30s and the 40s up to 45. No? So there were only 3 spaces. No? But we can go back to maybe to the self-portrait and start talking about that work, which is this. It's a painting from 1919, and it's interesting. The most interesting aspect of this painting, I think, is the shirt that he's wearing. No? And Remy Labrousse, who writes in the catalog as well, talks that this one side of the shirt refers to Paris and another to the countryside in Catalonia. No? He says that because in the right, it still may look like the paintings of the fields with the harvest and these things. And the other side is like a cubist arrangement of shapes. So it's like Miró is in 19 about to go to Paris for the first time. And it's already painting himself divided by the landscape and Paris. And this is also important in Miró, I think, because he was very interested in the rural world that is not that common in modern art. There is more modern art about the experience of the cities, I think. But for Miró, it was very important the landscape. He painted, especially at the very beginning of his career, all of these landscapes. No? When he was in Barcelona, there is a mythical gallery there called Sala Dalmau that had already a cubist exhibition in 1912, and where they were showing Duchamp and Robert and Sonia Delaunay, that they were in Barcelona during the First World War. And Miró met all of them at this time. It's a moment also that there was the representation of Marat, the opera with Picasso and Eric Satie, and that was a big scandal in the Opera House in Barcelona. And he was already in contact with Picasso, for example, and when he went to Paris, Picasso helped him, and the first studio he got, it had been a studio from Pablo Gargallo, another artist from Catalonia. No? So he was in touch with everything from very early on, and this painting is this showing of this will to go to Paris that immediately became for him like a mythical city. And when he was there in 1920, which is the first trip, he said to his friends and in letters that he was so shocked that he couldn't paint any longer, no? That he was very impressed with the avant-garde circles in Paris. Barcelona was a very conservative city, and even if it has this gallery, it was not like Paris, that there were artists from all over the world. But anyway, Dupin also says of this painting that it may be influenced by Romanesque frescoes. In Catalonia, there's a big group of churches, especially in the mountains, small churches with these Romanesque frescoes, and the simplicity of the painting and the kind of stylization of it, it may refer to that. No? And then we can go to the second painting that we have. This is the farmer's wife. As I said, it's a painting that belonged to Marcel Duchamp, as the other belonged to Picasso. Miró was in touch, as I was saying, with other artists and poets very early on. And this is an interesting one because to paint the farmer's wife, he used a doll, and he was doing that to try to make it more strange looking. And then yes, he has one of the most interesting things is that has this huge feet. And Jacques Dupin, the French poet and friend that wrote the major monograph of Miró, he said that it was a way of showing that Miró's feet were on the earth, and the magical or the poetry came from the earth as well. So it's this is an interesting thing about the farmer's wife. No, it's now a painting in the Pompidou collection. And then after that, they are not in the show. Miró painted 3 paintings that Dupin calls the Great Mutation, and are the 3 paintings. One is in the Guggenheim, another in MoMA, and another in the Reina Sofia, in which this initial realism from Miró, kind of a special miniature realism, transformed in science. And it only happened in 3 paintings. And after that, already in 1924, the paintings of Miró, they are very radical. Even he only met Breton in 24. A lot of them he did in the Rue Blomet, that he was in contact with André Masson and many poets, and also Michel Léris. No? But then Miró says in his letters and correspondence that he wanted to use techniques that were used by the avant-garde poets of his time, that was his French. So he liked the idea of texts that were incoherent or fragmented, or joining images that were very different, and with that sparking a new kind of meaning or expression, and also the way that the poets were using in calligrams, typographic poetry, no? And so it was very important for him, the use of the poetry of his friends. No?
Can I just interrupt a minute? Just
yes.
say, Enrique, it's so interesting you bring that up, because in 1927, of course, until then, he and André Masson shared the studio, and the guitar was on the wall and all that kind of thing. And so, and the Rue Blomet is where they were. And we did a big publication and show in New York about the Rue Blomet, where they all were. And all those poets you're mentioning, all of them were there gathering around, the painters. So it was painting and poetry, really big deal in the Rue Blomet.
Yes. There was also the title of the exhibition, one of the titles is the Absolute Reality, explained before. It was an expression from Breton, but it's a subject, the meaning of that appears frequently in Miró and other artists from his generation. No? But the Breton was saying that the new art, he could not only focus on external reality, that had introduced the internal reality, which is the reality of dreams and visions and imagination. No? So they were trying to make a new form of art. No? And Miró talks about this and about absolute truth, but also he thought that he was very interested, that is also a common interest of this generation, not only in Freud and Jung, but also on primitive art, no? And the fact that the primitive art, or so-called primitive art, had this strong spiritual presence and meaning. No? But anyway, so this is one of the paintings from 24. And I think it shows how quickly it changed from the painting, for example, the self-portrait or even the farmer's wife, to these very elemental markings. No? So here the Catalan peasant, you can only see this hat. This red hat is called a barretina. It's a traditional hat that the peasants used at that time. They don't use it anymore. And then there is a pipe with a frame. And then of the guitar, you can only, I think you can only see the keys to tune the guitar. I don't know how they are called in English. No? But he made a lot of paintings like this, in which the Catalan peasants, there's a series, there's I think it's 7 or 8, in which there is a color background, there is not perspective, there is not the creation of volume, and it's just a few lines with a few symbols. And there are paintings that are, they are very open to interpretation, no? But I think they're very radical if we see the year in which they were made. No? And also it's interesting that Miró said he didn't like abstraction and he didn't believe in it. And he thought that abstraction, that his paintings were not abstract, they were about specific things, even if they're not always so easy to identify, no? Or what he wanted to do. No? But we can move on to, this is another painting. It's interesting. This was from the collection of André Breton. He bought this painting, and it's quite a small painting. It's in the Caws house, the Caws Museum in Basel, and it's called A Gentleman, and it's a kind of caricature in a little way, no? But it almost looks, the gentleman in the painting, like a rooster, no? Because it has a kind of la cresta, I don't know, the crest. It's called the crest, what the bird has in his head. I'm not sure. But then you see like the mustache, there is
Cigarrillo.
Un cigarrillo. It's a cigarrillo, but it is, yes, and then there is like the 12th, that is just like a clock, no?
Yeah.
And then you see these feet with a few hair. But you can see that Miró is creating this sign or language with signs that are from his invention, no?
And Enrique, those traces that keep coming back in his painting, I love the way the dots are always a path to make you see inside as well as outside, just what you were saying, interior and exterior reality.
Yes.
The traces are everywhere.
Yes. But also this painting, I think it shows that it's humor as well. I also the Catalan peasant too, no? But that there is kind of humor. He was very interesting in Alfred Jarry, which is another writer we haven't mentioned. It's a bit early than the Surrealist, but it was a very big influence on Miró, and he did illustrations of Bourgeois. There is actually a painting in the show, that a very big painting that is Madame Ubu. But he liked the kind of grotesque and scandalous and expressive and in commas violent the word. No? But I think you can see here a little bit this Ubu, no? Or this word of Alfred Jarry.
And do you read that as a yes? I'm looking at the bottom. It looks like yes.
I think it's yes, because the gentleman is a kind of English idea, I suppose, at that time. And so he has a clock and yes, and a cigar and this mustache, strange feathers or hat or hair, which I don't know what that is. But I think it's this, no?
Yes. Sí. Claro.
And the Miró is interesting also because when he lived in the Rue Blomet, he only had a suit, but he was quite a dandy himself, and he kept the suit under the mattress to have it ironed. And he was practicing boxing, and he was always very well dressed. And people said that this studio was always very clean and neat. He was kind of a precise person. I actually saw his studio in Mallorca when he was still there, and it was true that everything was really in its place.
As opposed to Masson, who put everything everywhere, and you know, I love that. It was so different and so
yes.
cool.
But anyway, but Miró had these two sides, no? Like one of the ordered person, and then a more wild aspect as well, I think. But can we move on? This is another quite interesting painting, no? That is quite mysterious as well. I think it's a man urinating with a strange shoe that looks like a woman's shoe, and these shapes. And there is also this trace of lines that suggests again the passing of time and some movement. And these strange dark words in the background, they suggest like an alley, no? Like a dirty alley or something like that. I think it's quite mysterious as well, no?
And the traces and the curved lines, all traces and the tails and the everything, all together.
I think it's a wonderful painting, this, no? And this is, I wanted to focus especially in that one. It's called The Grasshopper. I think this painting, I think, has a quite a straightforward allegorical reading that it doesn't happen with, for example, with the painting before, that I wouldn't know what else to say about the meaning of the painting. But this one, you see several things, like the grasshopper has to be this white shape jumping from the mountains, like vomiting a blue line. No? So it's like a grasshopper jumping. The blue is a very important color for Miró. He did a very well-known painting that used to be in the collection of Pierre Matisse that is in the Metropolitan called Photo, Blue is the color of my dreams. No?
Beautiful.
And I think it's an allegory of inspiration, poetical inspiration or artistic inspiration, and also the act of creation. No? So you see this animal is jumping, vomiting a line of color. There is the sea that is black with some flags that suggest a kind of travel. And then the grasshopper is jumping towards a planet or the moon, where you see 3 volcanoes in eruption with a ladder. No? So it means there is a lot of internal eruption, I think. And the ladder is a clear mystical symbol that Miró used a lot. And then the other interesting thing is his name is signed, I don't know if you can call it a calligram, but you can see the J in red in the sort of left corner of the painting.
Yeah.
Then there is, I don't see now, the O is a bit further up, a little bit to the right. Then the AN of Joan is on the white part at the bottom, and then you see the M, Miró. So he's signing the landscape. So he's becoming the landscape. So I think it's quite an interesting one. And this idea of jumping and eruption and mystical ladder and traveling and all of that.
That's
I
wonderful.
think you can read that as a, and I when I saw that, it made me think one of my favorite poets as well as Stevens. No? And one of the poems I like more about him is Ideas of Order in Key West. And it's a poem about he's seeing in the beach a woman who is singing a beautiful song looking at the sea. And Stevens says that the woman becomes the poem or the song she's singing, and also the sea she's singing about. So they become one thing. You know? And I think this is a similar subject than this painting somehow.
And as if he's singing eternity and that blue going, as we know in his other paintings, the blue.
Yes. But and also the idea that he being a grasshopper, I think it's also are going back to the rural world, small things in nature that you can see as magical or beautiful. And I think it's a very strong painting. And also with the fire and everything. No? So it's like through poetry or through art, he's jumping into another world in the sky. No?
Jumping is nice.
Yeah.
And looking
this, yeah. But I think it's a fantastic painting. It's in a collection in Athens. And this is this belongs to a group of paintings. We managed to assemble 5 in the exhibition that are from 27. And they haven't been written a lot about them either, no? But Miró said that when he was doing that, he was thinking in the cave paintings and these symbols, no?
Yeah.
And they also refer to night, even if they are white. That is an interesting thing that appears in the exhibition. In the first room, there was also a small white painting from the collection of Michel Herries. It's very difficult to see, just like an insect on a branch. But
and it's like the petroglyphs that he loves.
Yes. So they're, but then you see again the things from nature that are very important for me, like animals or the sun or the moon or the stars. In his later work, many of his works, they will be the same subject, women or characters by night, the sun or the moon, and birds. And they are very black, but the black is a dominant color after the 50s. But in the 20s and 30s and 40s, the white stands by night in a different way. No? But we can continue with that. But they're a bit before when he went to the Rue Blomet, to the other studio. In 1927, he made a series of very large landscapes they always have an animal. This is a hare. There is another one with a rooster in the exhibition. They're in landscape divided in 2 colors, like if it was earth and the sky, or the inside world and the external world. And this spiral is the flight of a comet. That is another subject that appears.
And the kite.
Yes, or a kite. Is it there? Or it also looks like a flame or a horn of a bull. You know, could be many things. But it's interesting that the hair is also transparent, no?
Yes.
But it's a way of it's not a traditional rendering of an object or an animal. There is no shadows or creation of volume, no? So they're quite mysterious, and they look also, because they're always animals. I wonder if they could refer also to totemic forces, no? Or
and the openness of the white there, the openness is amazing. You can read into it what you want to.
You know, they're still quite suggestive, no? Or evocative is the word.
Yes.
By the way, this is another one of the dream paintings from 27. It's interesting because there is a big bird in the center that appears, eventually becomes a very major subject as well. In this period, he made paintings on brown background, blue background, especially, and then the white paintings. This would be one of the white. The Fratellini Brothers was the name of a circus. He did a series called the Circus Horse, or these paintings about the Fratellini Brothers. However, Jacques Dupin says he didn't like the circus, but I don't know. But I think modern artists, they were quite attracted to the circus in general. No?
Yes.
So I really don't know why Dupin says that. But anyway, and this is in the 30s. it's interesting because the word that is more poetical in the 1920s becomes more expressionist suddenly, no? And it could be with the people, quite a lot of people read these words from the 30s, a bit like that, to do with the wars. No? The Spanish war is from 36 to 39. So by 34, the ambience in Spain was quite, you know, people confronted with others. No? And then there was the Second War. No? And but this relates to, so again, to Jarry, these strange characters moving around, but also he made a series of paintings in 32 that were collages from magazines and sales catalogs. No? So he would put like a vacuum cleaner or a hammer or things like that and arrange them in abstract shapes, floating on background. No? But this is one of the first very expressionist paintings that will be a major characteristic of Miró's work till the end of his career. No? This in Barcelona. And we can continue a bit. Or this, another interesting thing about Miró is that he used a lot of unusual materials. This is made on cellotex. He also made paintings on masonite. At the end of, in the later paintings, he made paintings on plastic, on packaging paper, and or even in blankets that were used to collect almonds. So they would put it under the tree and the almonds would fall. So he was using a lot of cheap materials like that. And he was quite experimental. No? In the 30s as well, at the early 30s, he started talking about the assassination of painting. And it is something that people write a lot about it still. But Miró himself said that he didn't mean to actually kill painting forever, but to transform painting into something else. No? That he thought, especially with the painting from the end of the 19th century, that it was a painting that was decorative, that was about just the ability to represent the external reality, but they had become commodities as well. Issues that had been addressed by contemporary artists as well, no? Later on. But he when talking about the assassination painting, I think he talks about this idea of creating a new painting that is different, no? and relates to primitive art called primitive. No? But anyway, we can move on as well. This again is from 38. It's another expressionist painting. This is birds and insects floating on a background. I think here you could really see the influence of petroglyph. You know?
Yes.
There is an exhibition that I never seen, but I have the catalog. It's from 1980, and that explore this is by Donna Sitch, I think it was called the curator, and she found in the library of Miró some books about the caves in Spain and in other parts of the world, and the way that he took similar shapes from that. So there's a direct influence to this, no?
Like Altamira.
Yes, and Lascaux in France, and also the other caves that are in the south of Spain. But anyway, and this is like, I think is the culmination of the language of size, is the installation is a group of 23 works that he made in 1940 and 41. No? He had moved to Paris again. He was in Paris from 1920 to 29 most of the time. In 29 was the big recession, so they didn't have any money, so have to go back. But then went back a few times when he could, and when the Spanish War started, they escaped and they went to France. In 1940, he was commissioned to do a fresco in the house of American architect called Paul Nelson in Varindeville-sur-le-Mer. Braque also had a house there, and Miró became quite friendly with him when they were there. And while he was doing that, the Germans invaded Paris in 1940. So he went to Mallorca, where his wife was from, and finished the series of the constellation. They're quite small, all washes. He said to Roland Penrose, that's a British surrealist that wrote an early monograph, that when he was making some other paintings in this place in France, in Normandy, he was cleaning the brushes on paper, and then the shapes he was creating, suggesting this world of images. No? Here I like to go back to 2 or 3 things. No? One is there are 2 very famous self-portraits after the one we showed from 1917. No? One is in the collection of MoMA. It's from 37-38, and it's not a very big canvas, and it's drawn on the canvas with pencil. It has some color. You see a portrait of him, and he's a transparent person in a way that appears as stars and symbols in his face and the body, and his eyes are like in flames. So it's really a self-portrait as someone having visions. No? And then
let me just say, also, because just opened last night, the Man Ray exhibition, and there you see Man Ray's portrait of Miró. The transparency and the sort of vision that you're talking about is all surging forth. Amazing. So Man Ray, of course, was very close to Miró.
But the thing is, like, then there is the self-portrait number 2 from 38, which is in Detroit. And it's a fascinating painting because it's a black background. Is with the beginning of black as a regular color. And it's called self-portrait, but it's really like an abstract painting. You just see 2 big eyes in flames. The eyes are red circles with yellow flames. And on the black background, there are images of butterflies, fish, birds, and some abstract shapes. No? So it means that the self-portrait is not really about his external look, but about his visions. No?
Yes.
I think it's very interesting. No? And when I was reading that, I read a book of a French scholar who studied in Tehran Sufism, which is like the esoteric branch of Islam, called Henry Corbin, and has a book called The Man in Flames. And he says that the Sufis, they train to see colors internally, and that some colors are easier to see than others. So they start, I don't know the sequence of the colors, let's say with yellow, with red, with green. They reach to black, that they call black light. When they reach that, they manage to enter in a mystical experience.
And you were talking about the white spaces, you know, even in this one, you see the white looming through everything else.
Yes, but this is fabulous painting. And then there is another interesting thing about this Henry Corbin and the Iranian Man of Flames. Is when Miró painted the Harlequin Carnival, he said to Dupin and different people that he couldn't eat because he didn't have any money. So what he was doing, he was sitting in front of the wall in his studio and fasting and breathing. And when they are doing that for several days, suddenly all of these strange images will appear from the cracks of the walls or the irregularities of the painting. So it created this internal visionary world. So I thought, I don't think anybody has said that, but he called the constellations different way, but I think you can see them as self-portraits in a way. And I think it's an interesting idea. No? But he made these 23 constellations, half of them finished in Mallorca, and then he stopped painting. And he made drawings and works on paper from 41 to 45. There is a group in the exhibition. And then in 45, he made these very big paintings on white background that I think that is you see at the end wall. And I think that they're a kind of transcription of the language of the constellations. And now he's already focusing his subject to woman appeared in the night. And it's interesting again that the night is luminous and is white instead of being dark. But these paintings, I think they refer again to the petroglyphs and the world of signs and
figurations, yes.
Yes, and it's interesting that they always have these very big sacks, not both in the female and the male cases. No? And the bird is probably this big shape on the top part of the painting. No? But anyway, so I think the exhibition was covering this transition from the early one to reach to the sign language. It's another of the series. He made about, I forgot how many there are, but it's like 10 or 12. Then he made 2 on a darker background. And he also made 2 or 3 on a black background. So
wonderful with the eyes looking at you. You know, they're
yes.
interactive, some of his paintings.
Yes, and also you could see the relation to Calder. He's one of his best friends. It's funny that they look like flat Calders in a way.
Right.
But there was a big show in Basel about Calder and Miró, and I had a room with the constellations and the mobiles.
Yes.
I think it was in New York as well, the show, and it was wonderful.
And the shape shifting that he was always doing. Mutations, Jacques Dupin said. Mutations. Yes. I love mutations, seems just right.
Yeah. This is another, still one of the dream paintings. No? But people call it Women with a Red Hat. But some of the paintings in the 20s, you don't call only painting because you don't want to put them an extra meaning or whatever. But sometimes people have given them titles. No? So this is called, it was from the Revlon collection. When it was sold, it was the most expensive painting of Miró sold. I forgot, it was like 25 million or something like that. But it was sold a few years ago.
And still the traces and signs. I mean,
yes.
He believes the signs.
It's always like a strange movement, like it's a floating movement.
Yes. Yeah.
Because the depth is made in a very strange way because it's not a perspective, it's just different shapes and because of the size, you think that one may be further away. You know? But we can check. On this, we finished the show with this work. It's a bit later, but it's from 47. But I like it also because of the shape. I thought it would look good in the exhibition. But it's the frieze he did from the International Exhibition of Surrealism, Gallery Mag.
And it's like Ouroboros, like eating itself. You can feel it looping around itself.
Yes. And it's also in 47 is really the return to Miró to Paris as a really appreciated master, because he had then a big retrospective. So, and it's a moment that he was really well known. So this is kind of the arrival back to Paris as a major figure. No? About the constellations, I thought it's interesting to say that they were shown in New York for the first place. They were shown in 47. No? And I read that when they were shown there, it was the first artworks made by European artists during the war, seeing in America. And I think the exhibition had a huge repercussion and was seen by a lot of abstract expressionist artists and all the poets. And they even, I don't think they sold many at that time, but the artists really liked them. And it was an important moment.
And the poetry of the constellations, Breton's very famous, constellations poetry, it all comes together.
Yes, but is with Breton and Miró, they had a deep problematic relation, or they were not like that at the beginning. Miró didn't want to join the surrealist group. He was friendly with them, but didn't want to be a signature of them.
Right.
And then Breton said of him several times that he was too childish, that he was not an intellectual, and he was not involved in politics as Breton was. No? But eventually they became friends, and they did I think they did 3 books together, including a book of the constellation with text of Breton, which is a wonderful book. No? But anyway, I don't know what else to say.
That's beautiful. Look at that blue. Yes,
that is fantastic. No? The other painting at the end is called Head and a Spider. Just the eye, it's kind of a strange star. No?
Yes. Everything is there because it's open.
Yeah. And here the green painting is fantastic because it's called The Lion. And it only has like this mane. And there are 3 or 4 lines that make like the tail or the legs of the lion. But then it is a scratch with the nails, as if the lion had scratched the surface of the painting. You cannot see it from here, but it has these marks. No? The painting from Michel Legris is the one with the double black frame, the right. But another thing I did in the exhibition is I put quite a lot of small paintings. Because I think sometimes this silly thing happens that people think it's more important a larger painting. No? But Miró did really a lot of very small paintings in the 20s and 30s, which are fabulous. They're really wonderful. You see, here is the next to the hare is the rooster.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. And then also we finished, so you see that is like on the ceramics in 45, besides these paintings, Miró started working on ceramics and also in bronze. No? So very quickly, it's a moment that he started doing also big outdoors projects, like murals and big sculptures. They're wonderful. Some they're done with Llorenç Artigas and they're like painted by Miró, but others they're real sculptures. No? And this painting at the corner is one of the white paintings that are not white. It's the 2 darker ones. It's called The Bullfight. And again, he paints the bullfight as a kind of mythical idea of a mythical world. No? It's a painting that Miró really liked, and he donated that to the French state in 45, and is now in the Pompidou. But it's an interesting painting because when he wrote about this, he wrote quite a bit in one of his notebooks. He says that he wanted to transform, and you see how he transforms the images. He wanted to put like the scarves that the audience move, they became the wings of doves, for example, or like the arrows on the bull, they became something else, no? Or so they transform it in different images. No?
It's like the mutations that you found.
Yes, yeah, exactly that. And then there's also in the painting we didn't see here, there is a version of a painting by Rafael La Fornarina. In the period of the assassination painting, he did a few versions of Dutch paintings and a constable. And again, this is part of the grotesque expressionist world of Miró. But we had one, the Narina. And the ones on the left, there are all of these drawings made in the 40s, early 40s, when he was not painting. And it's a moment in the paintings they're not projects for paintings, they're autonomous drawings. No? And
this has been so amazing, Enrique and Marianne. I wonder, we have about, we have a little bit of time. Are there any other questions you have for each other before we move to audience Q&A?
Yeah, I'd like to know, Enrique, did he change the titles? Some are just called painting, I know, and other people assign titles. But when he titled something, did he keep that title?
Yes, he did. But it's like, for example, when I was doing the exhibition, I was in touch with the Miró estate. And for example, he said the Fratellini Brothers is the wrong title. It should be called Painting. But the Bayeler didn't want to change because they said they always call it the Fratellini Brothers when it's the popular name. You see, but sometimes people forget these things and you don't know, but I think he eventually put titles to the paintings, but in the 20s, for many of them, they're only called paintings.
And in stages, did he paint and then go back to it? I know nothing about the stages of his painting.
No, there is only one that we haven't seen an image. It's called, it's a portrait of Madame Ubu. It's called Le Réveil de Madame Bubu alors. And it's a very strange painting. It's very big. It's dated 39 and 1960. He left it abandoned and it's white with some drawings. And in 1960, he finished that. No? And it's quite an unusual painting, but it has a specific title. And then he had a painting called Paintings Poems that have titles that look like poems, that are very long. Like the titles of the constellations. Sometimes it's like the fluorescent, the snail following the trace, the night bird to the moon, this kind of thing. And so he has also different ones. And there are paintings that have text on them. There is a painting of the Tate that is a black painting, which is a pair of the self-portrait in Detroit that is called A Star Caresses the Breast of a Black Woman. And you don't see any breast or any black woman, you just see some sides. But I think it may be related to a poem by Mallarmé that is about a black woman as well, and it's an hermetic poem. I forgot the title. But he was really interested in poetry as well. So he experimented with titles too.
And that time in the Rue de Mail, the poets and the painters all glomming together. Beautiful. Especially
yes.
1927, just beautiful.
I think Miró is surprisingly, I think that the paintings, they still look very modern. Mm-hmm. So some other artists, they look more on their time, and if they are wonderful. But Miró, I think that these paintings, especially from the 20s, I think they are incredible. And they're very mysterious and poetic still. But anyway, Miró, so he was in also, you could see his political aspects, not only formal aspects, he has different readings. No? That it is not only about the invention of formal, the change of the language. I think there are these other aspects attached to it. No?
And that sense of place when he brings that little piece of grass and he brings it to Paris, it's very moving.
Yeah, but Margaret Rowell says that I think I love her writing on Miró, no? That he sees his work as a kind of mythopoetical world, almost in the description with poetical, and the way he transformed reality into life into art, no? Or transforms his life into an image, no? This kind of thing. And then I know Miró was a big fan of Paul Klee, and Paul Klee has an interesting sentence that is like, he said of himself that he was abstract with memories.
Yes.
Which I think is similar to what Miró does, no? That creates a language that may look self-sufficient, but it comes from experience, no? And personal experience.
And goes on yes. Like the spiral.
Yeah. But anyway, there's been a big biography published in Spanish of Miró. I don't know if I don't know if it's available in English, in 2 big volumes. There is also a lot of new information. They published the letters of Pierre Matisse to Miró, no?
Yes.
And it's published in French. But I think his life is very well documented now. Very well. I don't know. Do you want to make any question? My English is really deteriorated since I left Ireland.
It seems very good.
Sorry about that. But anyway, thank you.
This has been so amazing. Thank you so much for this incredibly generous and illuminating conversation. We have several questions from the audience. So if you don't have any other questions, Marianne, I will turn it over to...
Turn it over.
Okay, we're turning it over. So the first question is going to be from Robert. Robert, I'm going to give you the chance to unmute and ask your lovely question directly.
Thank you. Thank you to Enrique and to Marianne. This was really wonderful. I have a question for Marianne. I wonder if you could just say, Marianne, a little bit more about your thinking about the relationship between what Miró is doing figuratively and in construction and making in relation to poetic construction and making. And I also was, I'm interested in that whole area, what you would have to say about it, but I was very intrigued by your brief gesture towards the idea of the constellation in Breton and the way that that might be grasped in Miró's work. Thank you very much.
Love the question. Love particularly the one about constellations, because of course the starry thing and the star being, you know, as Enrique said, interior, exterior, and that illumination and the dark night of the soul and that whole business, Juan de la Cruz. So clear is it in Miró that he's thinking out and in and all around, and that kind of constellation, you know, fragments put all together seems to work magnificently, I think. And that's where the poem and the paintings coincide. And that's, seems to me, that's about Paul Klee, and it's about surrealism in the real sense. I mean, the real sense, I mean, beyond, you know, the schools and the everything, the real surrealism, which is about out and in coinciding somehow. So thank you for the question.
Wow, great question. And thank you for that answer, Marianne. The next question is going to be from Raymond Foy. Hi, Raymond. We'll give you the chance to unmute.
Hello, Raymond.
Hi, Enrique. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Marvelous program. You mentioned your admiration of Marguerite Raoul's writings about Miró. I'm wondering, actually, I have two questions. Who else do you think has written exceptionally well about Miró? Perhaps Jacques Dupin or anyone else who comes to mind. And my other question was, are there any insights you think that as someone from Spain or someone from Catalonia might have about Miró that the rest of us in America or other countries might somehow miss?
Yeah, well, about the writing, I think Jacques Dupin is a very good one, no? You know, and Marguerite Raoul, I like especially, she did an exhibition about the constellations in Reina Sofia, and it was fantastic. And then I think it's my favorite, but also Caroline Lanchman was very good. There was a curator in MoMA that organized a big show. And I like of the younger writers, the ones in the catalog, Rémi Labrousse, that is a French writer, and he's written about a lot the relations of primitive art and modern artists, including Giacometti and Picasso and Miró, and he's really very good. And William Jeffers is a major scholar too. And there is Robert Lubar, who's an American scholar. He's written a lot about the Catalan feeling in Miró's work and the political aspects as well. So there's quite a lot of writers on that. I think the things about Miró, when there was the big show in MoMA about the 30s, 37 by Adam, I remember, and I was a bit shocked about that in the chronology, there was no mention of the Spanish Civil War. So they jumped into 39, the Second War, and I just thought, well, maybe it's not important in America, the Civil War, but for Miró it was. You know, so I think sometimes the most local aspects there, like there is a book by a Catalan scholar called Josep Balzac about the relationship of Miró and the Romanesque art and frescoes. And it's a wonderful book, and it's very detailed, and the research is fantastic, and she found really motifs taken from different frescoes. No? So I think that will be an interesting one. No? The thing related to the Catalan landscape and the Catalan culture as well. He was really a big defender of the Catalan language.
And that red hat he always had in the studio.
Yes. Yeah. And for him, it was very important. He hated Barcelona as well, because when he was went to Paris, he was always saying that Barcelona was a middle class, provincial city, that, you know, that they're very conventional. But he liked the Catalan landscape more. No? He was painting in Montrose, he was going back and forward. And also when he was in Mallorca, so he liked it because of that. No? And he used, he collected a lot of things from crafts and toys, and used that as inspiration for shapes. You know, and a lot of them were local. I mean, he will be interested in Japanese things or in Polynesian things, but he had a big collection of local crafts.
Excellent. Hope to see you soon.
Yes. I think I'm coming to New York in May.
Yes, good. See you then.
Thank you so much for that question, Raymond, and thank you for that really great answer, Enrique. The next question is going to be from JF Upjohn. JF, I will give you the chance to unmute.
Hi, thank you. The exhibition looks wonderful and this program is terrific. Enrique, I think it was you who referred to a painting or some of the paintings as similar to flat calders. And I wondered, can you talk about dimensionality in Miró's work? Was flatness or dimensionality even a concern or an interest at that time?
No, what I meant flatness, that they were paintings instead of sculptures. No?
Yes.
But yeah, but he's in the sense that there is depth that is not kind of the traditional depth of the Renaissance, not with the perspective. It's like they're flat colors, and then he paints these forms. Margit Rowell and Rosalind Krauss, they call it constellated forms, because they look like the stars. But I think it's like, I remember a sentence from Harold Rosenberg, which I think it was very funny, making fun of Greenberg when he was saying that Pollock paintings were flat. And Rosenberg said that you couldn't walk in a Pollock painting, but you could go into a spacecraft inside. So Miró is a bit like that, no? That I think they the space is deep, but in a different way. I think that when he was doing it, it was an innovation, really, no?
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for that really great question. Thanks for that answer. If there are no more questions from the audience, then please do raise your hand or post your question in the chat if you have one. I'm going to ask the last question. And I'm opening the floodgates here with this one, but I am wondering if what you think about or have to say about the relationship between Miró and translation as a practice, because there's kind of that space between languages when you're translating and that transcendent moment. And I wonder if there's any relationship, especially in how much language has been associated with Miró's practice and poetry.
I love that question.
Enrique.
No,
you can answer that. You want me to answer that?
Either of you.
Yeah. I think Miró, he had a lot of, I've seen the books in his library, you know, and he had a big collection of French and Spanish poets, especially, you know. But I remember curiously, I spoke with Dore Aston, and she told me that she has seen Miró's collection of poetry, and they were all sealed, that hadn't read them. But I don't think this is true. I don't know why she had this impression, but I remember she told me that. But he speaks in Catalan and French and Spanish. He normally titled the paintings in French, but I think it was because he was there. But obviously he read in French and Catalan and Spanish. He was friends with the Catalan poets as well, and he did a lot of artist books. I think there are more than 100 altogether. You know, they did books with Breton or Tristan Tzara or many other poets, but also he did a lot with Brossa and Bosch and the major Catalan experimental writers from the 20s.
And on the Rue Blomet, they were all reading poetry aloud.
Yes. And he was friends. When Miró died, I went to see his wife a couple of times. And she first said, why do you want to come? And I said, I wanted to meet you and ask you things about Paris because it's like such a mythical moment. And then she told me things, for example, that for a period, they were having lunch with James Joyce all the time when Samuel Beckett was his assistant. And they started eating together because they were going to the same restaurant. I mean, they were just friendly and they were going to the same restaurant. But I think it's amazing to have had lunch with Joyce and Beckett, for example, because you don't think about them when you think about Miró. But then he was friends with Hemingway as well, no?
And they bought together.
La Masia.
Yes. One short, one tall.
Yeah. So Miró has a fame of being a very private person and very quiet. But he was in touch with a lot of people. Miró's wife told me a story that I think is very funny as well. When she was 20 years younger than Miró, and she said they were meeting with a group of surrealist friends, and she became very friendly with Michel Leguy's wife because it was the same age that she was, and she also was a sort of middle-class bourgeois woman from the provinces. So they were sitting together talking about the food they were cooking and this kind of reception, while all of the others were drinking and being more wild. But Pilar was a very good contrast for Miró because he was like really down-to-earth person. So I think she was very important for him and organizing him and helping him. And there was a very good couple.
Marianne, do you have any thoughts on translation and Miró?
A lot. I wondered if Enrique's wonderful, that's a wonderful essay you wrote. Has that been translated, I assume, into English?
Yes, it is. It is, yeah. It's in the catalog of the exhibition.
Wonderful.
It's Spanish and English and Basque as well.
Basque, wow. Yeah.
No,
Those of us who translate, I mean, I love the idea of translation and the translation of painting into poetry, and that kind of crossing over of translation makes every bit of sense.
Yeah, but it's difficult to translate poetry, especially. I tried a few times, and it is very hard. It becomes something else somehow.
Yes, and the sound of the whole, I agree, absolutely. I love it. I love retranslating. I translated Sahar over and over, and 20 years later, I would do it differently, and I did do it differently.
And you translated quite a few French poets, no?
Yes, I loved René Char and the whole thing about translation, the whole merging of one thing into another, and you can remerge it differently, the shape-shifting thing.
Yeah. Miró also made books with René Char as well.
Yes, exactly. That's where I first heard about Miró, was with René Char. Brings friends.
Thank you so much for those answers. And thank you everyone for your amazing questions. And thank you again for this conversation. At the Rail, we have a tradition of ending our community events with the poetry reading. And so without further ado, I'm going to introduce our poet laureate of the day, John Coletti.
Thanks for having me.
Hi, John. Poet John Coletti is the author of Peppermint Oil, Deep Code, Mum Halo, Same Enemy Rainbow, and Physical Kind. With Anselm Berrigan, he is the author of the limited edition Scacers. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to John.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing conversation. I'd love to see that show. I think it'll have to be virtual, but je suis pas René Char, not René Char, but here we go. Okay. Generosity Wars. We are a mountain with a heart, and we cast many shadows. High knees. After May snow, this young, brilliant sycamore, I frighten the melody of its sun. Work the stalk carefully, count out, let pass, and warm water run. Soft and firm bruises, as if my heart captured all its details and methods once uncovered, what had been covered up. I miss slow dancing. I want to stay and dance awkwardly, to fall alone. For practice. Used a used Rilke to put out a fly I'd endeavored to save. Repugnance become me. Would you have looked into my eyeglasses had I shattered the glass with our dull thud differently? I don't care to sing for everyone slowly. Wading through life, the outside air goes into my mouth. Warm like a breath of an osprey wrapped around an oversized adolescent cat. We react perfectly to imperfect form. I am, knock an eyelash out as neighbor howls into unpainted jars. I sweat new growth to see our faces soften Q ratings in large breathy increments. Where does the things to do form originate from? Jimmy? Then forget to eat waterlogged chocolate. Would love you to conjoin me in an awkward fridge. Yes, mes frères. Note to ask almost everything when almost anything just won't bother. I've challenged myself to remember things that still grow. Near home. The pink of the light in its night, impossibly beautiful. Don't hold back what is true, even if convenient, awkward, and emotionally compromising. I think I just saw a rat fall from a tree past the window. A glowing buzzard, covered in silica, playing at the nervous gates, a little time behind eyelids. Their songs never stop. Find the odd sparrows, working at shapes, all quiet in the unclear intent. Human response. If you draw vibrant flowers. the moon's chipped orbital socket, hugging the cartoon of the beautiful frustrations life draws upon, that my veneer of non-competitiveness is competition itself. Okay, spread out and help radiant eye be a sweet angel in your past. Curfew. Mars and Venus on a ledge, tracking in red clay, 1:45 a.m. Stars equinox, clean off, fall down the fire escape, across white paint, glass, all pain sounds like labor without aid. Thanks, everyone.
Wow, John, that was brilliant. Thank you so much for that reading. Thanks for sharing your work with us. Thank you again to Enrique. Thank you to Marianne. Thank you to the team at Guggenheim Bilbao, who were very supportive in preparing for today's event. We'd of course also like to thank the Terra Foundation, who sponsor our NSE program and make daily conversations like this one possible. They also support our archive, which you can view on the Rails YouTube channel. For 22 years, the Brooklyn Rail has provided a platform for the arts, culture, and politics through our monthly publication and public events like this one, our daily NSE. You can check the chat for a link to donate to support the Rail. And if you're free on Monday at 1 p.m. for our 800th NSE, a lovely and exciting milestone, we'll be featuring a conversation with Ronnie Horn, Jan Vo, and Amanda Gliebisi on the occasion of Horn and Vo's concurrent exhibitions at Xavier Hufkens in Brussels. We'll conclude with a poetry reading by Suzanne Goldenberg. And as is Rail tradition, you all can now turn on your microphones and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely.
Thank you.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks,
John.
Thank the poems. Thanks, Marianne. Thank you so much. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for the reading, John.
Amazing.
Thank you for the reading.
Thanks for having me.
See you around tomorrow.
Wonderful.
Everybody.
I love your writing. I love the catalog.
Gracias, Mile. Bye.